Hello, this is Rafa in post-production. This is part one of part two. Technically, it's very difficult, well, relatively difficult to combine notes. We had some technical mishaps through this. So just so you know, that's what's happening. Hello, hello. Welcome to Talking Pedagogy with Pat and Rafa. I'm Rafa.
I'm Pat.
And we're here to talk about how to start the year in a Reggio Inspired aligned fashion or way. You were telling me, Pat, a little bit when thinking about a next step for this episode. What could we talk about? And I really loved your idea because I'm right now starting the school year with my team at Mi Casita, and it's top of mind of how do you in practice set things up in a way that align with Reggio principles. So thank you.
You're so welcome. I would say that, yes, right now it's top of mind for me as a coach and somebody who's working with schools and they're getting ready to start the new year. How do you hit the reset button? And what are some of the things that you really need to think about, especially if you're using the Reggio Emilia approach when getting ready to open your classroom?
Mhm.
What are some of those things? And I mean, Rafa, for me, I think one of the most important reminders that I'm giving my teachers and the people that I'm working with, the leaders in the schools, is you don't know what your community, the children that are going to make up your community.
Yeah.
And so making a lot of big choices before you've let them come in to become your collaborators and you've gotten to know them would be a mistake. And so
Mm.
the Reggio Emilia approach, I believe, is very minimalistic in its getting started, and it focuses much more on relationships, community building, and with some really rich invitations of loose parts and centers being well defined so that children can read the room, but not a lot of set in stone kind of work goes into setting up your room.
Yeah. A lot of it is setting up in a way that is comforting, that's homey, right? Some examples that I'm thinking of what I'm working on with my team is somehow using the furniture or creatively using cloth or other materials to divide the space in a meaningful way, or with rugs or mats, whatever one has.
Yes.
So that's a great way to start the year, I think, because children do find safety and adults find safety in having a sense of what each part of the room is. So maybe the construction area has its own carpet, and maybe the art area has its own place for materials. And
Right.
relatedly with materials, having I like the idea of some like rules that it can be fun to plan and frustrating at times, but basically avoiding stacking materials so everything can be seen at once. Experimenting, and this is inspired by Montessori, with the idea of if of trays
Uh-huh.
and seeing where trays can fit in the environment in a way that allows children to easily move things around and put them back. And so I'll report back once we do more of that this year. That's
Can't
a
wait to
newer,
hear how that goes.
yeah,
Yeah.
newer
No,
thing.
that's a great idea. I'm thinking about autonomy and how at the
Mm,
beginning of the year, Reggio Emilia environments and Reggio Emilia communities are building in for children the expectations, which are very
mm,
clear
mm.
about what children's responsibilities are. And because we have a strong image of children, 2-year olds, 3-year olds are sweeping the floors with little, brooms the right size for them, or helping clean the tables, or, you know, and that makes me think about the design of the classroom needs to support as much autonomy as possible. So when you're thinking about your art materials, your easels, if you have a classroom sink, you want your art center to be living very close to that classroom sink so that children can help in cleaning things up and putting things away. It's just very important for them to start to have that sense of when they need more water for their watercolors or whatever, they can go to the sink and get those things that are needed. They can clean the brushes. And so in my classroom, I remember when somebody told me that, like, really think about your design as intentionally as you possibly can, so that children really from the very beginning understand that these are some expectations and these are your rights to be able to take out materials that you want to use, and layering all of that in from the very beginning of the year is important.
Yeah, I think the layering, that word is really important because layering to me is connotes taking things step by step. So
Yes.
part of that is explicitly teaching the expectations. So how do you clean the brushes? And whenever putting materials out, considering, do I want to present this material in the circle time first and then put it up? Or will they put it up and then bring their attention to it? There's different ways to do it right. But I think the big thing there is being, back to your word, intentional about why. Like, why am I presenting this material, first of all? And also, how am I going to present it? And oftentimes, explicitly, directly presenting it is a great idea. I think there can be
Wonderful idea.
a misconception that you don't teach children how to use materials ever. I think it needs to be very thoughtfully done because yes, we can show children how to use materials in a way that constrains their thinking, but
Yeah.
also if we don't teach them some different ways of using them, that can also constrain their thinking when they don't know where to start.
Yeah.
So I'm a fan of the balance of,
Mhm.
especially when it has to do with safety, or especially when it has to do with just what it means to take care of a material. I
Yeah.
mean, for example, crayons. Yes, crayons break. Yes, you can remake crayons when they're broken. They're not lost, right? I still personally think there's a value in showing children that there are ways to work with crayons. That means we can keep using the crayons in the way that we enjoy. But if children are also at the same time very interested in breaking the crayons and seeing what happens, transform them, that can also be another direction. So it really just depends on what one is aiming to do.
But you know what, Rafa, you bring up something very reminds me of the word flexibility, and
Hmm.
I think that the environment has to really always have that flexibility in a Reggio inspired classroom because, for example, do you have a hard and fast rule in your classroom of if this is something in the dramatic play center, it has to stay in the dramatic play area?
Hmm.
Or can blocks move about the room? And I would say that that is one of the things that I like to really promote in
Hmm.
teachers thinking is when you make those kind of rules, a lot of other thinking can't happen when children don't have the freedom. Now, going back to expectations of the environment, and there does need to be some agreements made for order, right? Because it can become very chaotic if those agreements are not in place. So, if children want to take things to other places in the room, they also need to have a plan for that. And teachers need to, as the researcher and architect helping support their play, you need to be checking in and noticing.
Mm,
So tell me more about that. Where is this going? And tell me more of what is your plan? I'm wondering, I'm
mm,
curious. And so that is another thing that I try and inspire teachers to promote in the thinking of children is it's okay if you need to take something someplace that's it's not living, but just remember it does live in another place and to take it back when you're done. And also tell me your plan. I'm excited. Like I want to know more. So that is another thing, as well as making sure that furniture can move. If you haven't bought all of your furniture or you're getting a budget to, and I gosh, congratulations right now when we're talking about budgets. They've been cut a lot. But if you're somebody who's lucky enough to have extra money this year, get new furniture pieces that have wheels that can lock because it gives you so much more ease in changing the environment to meet the needs of whatever project is happening. Wouldn't you say?
wheels help a lot, absolutely, and it helps children partake more easily in moving things around the classroom.
Yeah.
I think
Did I
that
tell
this.
you that story, Ralph? I don't mean to interrupt you, but did I tell you that story? I think I did. I know I have. About my our good friend Jennifer's
Uh-huh.
experience with letting the children help when they were ready to change the room for a project, having
Yeah.
them sit down and really, and these were 3 year olds, sit down and really plan with her, like what the changes should be. And they made those decisions together and created maps about changing the room that, things that would need to be supported. And then the children actually helped change the room. So I just love that. And also, maybe at the beginning of the year in a Reggio classroom, in your meetings, saying, how does the environment feel to you? Talking about each part of the environment and saying, What's working? Is there anything we want to change as a community? That's really the way we like to let children know this really is your environment and my environment, but we're working together as collaborators. So anyway, I was just thinking about her wonderful story where the little girl was like brilliant at spatial understanding and
Mm.
showed up as a leader at 3 years old about how to do certain changes, and it was really exciting for them.
Yeah, and all that relates to believing in children's ability to do that in the first place, which relates to having a strong image of children.
Yeah.
And so it's always interesting to me for people to think back to their reactions to what you're saying, for example. And are there any reactions? Is the reaction, oh, yeah, or is actions like, oh, I don't know? And any of those reactions are an invitation to consider, like, what's that about? What
Yeah.
does that say about my image of children in this moment? Because
Yeah.
we have so many images of children inside of us. So it's okay to have weaker image of children that live inside of me. It's more a question of realizing when you're pulling from
Yeah.
one image of a child and another and
Mhm.
choosing to go with the stronger image of the child that you have inside of you as well. So as you're
Yes.
talking about children taking part in developing space, having conversations, teachers taking seriously the ideas and being very curious and excited about what children are doing, and
Mhm.
at the same time holding children accountable to putting things back in their place. That's all part of being in a community.
That's right. That responsibility to one another. But I really believe that in Reggio, we talk about documentation, and some of the most important documentation is documenting in the beginning of the year, you know, just what's happening as your community is coming together
Hmm.
so that parents understand how you approach the work as well as the children understand the importance of, we're documenting the learning that's happening as we begin to form these strong attachments, trust, and relationships amongst all of us. Yeah, that kind of documentation is a great way to start.
Yeah, documenting, it depends where we all are too. Like with my team, I know that documentation is still relatively new
Yeah,
and they grew a lot last year. At the same time, they're also growing in how they start the year to set up the environment and the routines and procedures to really be able to focus on the deeper document. I don't want to say even say deeper, but the different, more variety of things we can document.
right.
At times, we would get overwhelmed with some of the behaviors in the classroom, and so in
Mhm.
reflection, we thought about how can we further better layer. Going back to the word layer, in this school year, what we expect of children. I work with 2 to 5 year olds as a reminder, mostly 2 and 3 year olds, some 4 year olds, and as a range of development. So we're really going back to learning about some of the milestones in each of those years typically, and what to tend to expect so we can better plan proactively
Right.
for what's, because the conversations, for example, at the circle depends on your group of little ones, probably requires a lot of explicit modeling of how do you have a conversation, and
That's
also
right. Yeah.
some 3 year olds are really able to latch on. Some 3 year olds are not quite interested or latching on to that. Even though they're processing the conversations, they're not necessarily participating back and forth in a way that's visible to me at least, right? So and it's like all those different things to layer when thinking about the beginning of the school year.
And one of the things we used as a scaffold when I was teaching for
Mm.
young children to help them in the conversation skills was letting children bring something from home that they wanted to share with the group
Mm.
and letting them be the leader then in sharing and calling on their friends who, you know, would raise their hand and say they wanted to know something about the item. And then that child who was sharing had that responsibility to decide who he was going to pick on and how he was going to answer the question. And this was for children as young as 3. So it was really exciting to kind of give them that platform and to see them step into it and recognize that children can hold court with their peers when given some of those kind of scaffolded opportunities. And so, Rafa, I'm thinking right now that we've really covered a lot about, just some of the thinking about starting the beginning of the year in this Reggio inspired and influenced way. it's going to be different for some of you who are not Reggio that we hope are still listening to us, even though we're talking today about the Reggio Emilia approach. But all things considered, the beginning of the year really is all about creating an environment of trust, respect, and safety for young children. So that's really what we're hoping that everybody's engaging in when thinking about the beginning of the year and how to really set yourself up for success in building that community.
Yeah. Hey, this is Rafa in post production. Please log on to the next episode to see how the rest of the conversation goes a couple days later.